Boxen has made her choice, Morena has made another very intimate friend, and we are about to witness the birth of Hunter x Hunter's next most devastating Nen specialist. So this was a big chapter for card game enthusiasts once again, and one that dives much deeper into Morena's abilities, which I didn't expect any more of considering that we've already played the power card, but Morena, she gave us this gift, as little by little we're clarifying her ability, and it looks like I've been thinking about this very incorrectly. Up until now, I've been assuming that Contagion and the negotiation game were different Hatsu, but it looks like they are both elements of one incredibly complicated specialist ability. Contagion would appear to be the umbrella name for everything we see happening here, but it has 3 conditions to clear in order to function. Saying yes through the game, kissing Morena, and watching a gruesome murder. But 3 conditions, mate, that's not bad at all. Considering that Krollo has at least 4 conditions to clear before he can even use Skill Hunter, 3 isn't awful for Contagion at all. In fact, depending on the ability he wants to steal, Krollo actually has 5 conditions to clear, with the extra one being the theft of a national treasure for this particularly powerful Nen ability. But the first condition for Morena is by far the most difficult, which is that a player must engage in the negotiation game and select yes. And if a player does actually engage in the game, then that can be quite difficult because at that stage there's an element of chance involved. However, the odds are very much skewed in favor of selecting a yes because we have yes, the Joker, and return, which can all function as a yes. But at the same time, with the right person, this is a very easy condition to clear. Because say someone did want to join Morena and they don't need convincing. All they need to do is refuse to play the game, and in doing so you get an automatic choice between the yes and no cards. So that removes any element of chance for someone who actually wants to join Morena. And the implication of this chapter is that each of the Heil-Ly members have gone through this process, which is a fact that does make me appreciate having spent 3 chapters on the negotiation game a bit more, because I do think it's very important that we have a detailed process of how everyone ended up joining Morena. And sure, we don't know all of their personal motivations yet, but that's what makes each and every Heil-Ly member that much more interesting now. When explaining the rules, Boxen asked if she could be the one to choose the cards to be discarded in order to prevent the cheating, and Morena said, sure, we've already done that a few times. And that did lead some people to go down a bit of a conspiracy theory hole that Morena and Boxen were stuck in a loop playing the negotiation game until Boxen said yes, but the Occam's razor to that was always that she'd played it to recruit other family members before Boxen, which means that not everyone was immediately on board with joining Morena, which is difficult to conceive of now because the rest of the family is backing her 100%. But a lot of them didn't just refuse to play and select the yes card. They needed convincing, and some of them may have been very much like Boxen. Some of them may have even been staunchly opposed to the idea, which makes me look forward to getting to know all of these guys a bit more. When they were first introduced, honestly, I was overwhelmed and kind of annoyed that Togashi was dumping a new 20+ characters on us, but over time they are slowly winning me over, and I'm now much more interested in what's happening with this family than most other things happening elsewhere on the ship, especially the ones who were opposed to joining it first. But Morena, through the game, mate, she worked her charms and managed to seduce them all. And with that, I guess we should talk about the kiss, because this is one of the funniest things to happen in Hunter x Hunter for quite some time. Togashi is doing a frankly disgusting job of making Morena increasingly likable and adorable, especially with that very shoujo blush she makes just thinking about the kiss, directly juxtaposed against a very serious no-nonsense Boxen, and you can tell just how serious she is because her eyes are jet black. Alright, just an artistic tangent about Boxen, I've been thinking about this for a while, but she's a very enigmatic character, and a big part of that is how Togashi draws her eyes. They're often left deliberately vacant, and it's not just because she's being stoic in enemy territory. This was also how she was drawn when she was first introduced with the rest of her friends. And in this chapter, for example, Boxen's eyes change quite radically between pages. We have the jet black set here, but later on they turn pure white, and the most standard way they're drawn is in this almost deliberately messy manner. Close-ups of Boxen's eyes are just scribbles over scribbles, and even though they're ever changing from black to white to scribbles, all of these effects make Boxen very hard to connect with because eyes are the gateway to emotion, and Boxen always seems to have these barriers to connection, which is why conversely Morena is becoming disturbingly easy to connect to, because her eyes are drawn in a much more straightforward and inviting way. It makes makes her feel much more open. And I have to imagine that the barrier between Boxen and the reader was erected on purpose by Togashi, given her very surprising answer to the negotiation game at the end of the chapter, because it leaves us infinitely curious about Boxen's motives. She's a difficult character to put your finger on, but a much easier character to just ram your tongue down, as Morena discovered, because this kiss, mate, it was so awkward. And I think it's implied that it was quite involved. But I really loved when Morena accused Boxen of this being her first time. Just completely baseless out of nowhere. Unless, and this is face value, this is just fun, wacky comedy. But because this is Hunter x Hunter, I do wonder if Morena has a way of reading Boxen that we're not enlightened to. Doesn't necessarily have to be Nen related. Morena just might be good at reading people like Boxen's good at reading her. And I really like that we don't see the kiss. We just skip right past it, and apparently things didn't go very well. A bit later on, Boxen even says that it wasn't a kiss, making me wonder exactly what Morena did to her. Definitely wasn't, a soft peck. There was probably lots of tongue in places that Boxen wasn't expecting, just to, make sure that the contagion gets spread as thoroughly as possible. Of course, we're putting a lot of trust in Morena's words here, because just imagine if the kissing was completely superfluous and Morena was lying about her ability to explore her own desires. Because really, who are you to argue with her? Oh, well, you see, kissing me is a condition of my Nen ability, and it has to be a long, deep kiss, and you have to like it. If you know nothing about Nen, and actually even if you do, then you're not left with a lot of options other than to go, alright, I guess we're heading in. But the full stop on this gag is exactly what I anticipated would happen, which is that Boxen retrieved the X card, which allows her to not give an answer and walk away freely, and that card that she desperately needed to end this game got immediately discarded again, essentially making the entire turn and this kiss completely unnecessary and rather unhelpful from Boxen's perspective. And we spend half of the chapter getting to that point, after which point Boxen is now left with 3 cards on Morena's side of the board to choose from. She gets one more round of interrogation before doing a 50-50 on her life. And I am so thrilled that Boxen finally chose question A. It's definitely the card that Kurapika would have chosen, and you know what, while we're on him, Kurapika is a bit of a fashion icon with his sharp suit, flowing golden locks, and most importantly their chain drip. And thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Nan America, they are allowing the everyman to come one step closer to Kurapika goodness, having just released a Kurapika exclusive Judgment Chain inspired bracelet to go along with their previously released Judgment Chain ring. I really love the ring, so I was so excited to get one of these. And the great shame is that this video is completely incapable of doing this justice, because the stakes of Retribution look and feel superb, as they should, with a one-size adjustable chain available in either titanium or 0.925 sterling silver, which are the same phenomenal materials to choose between for the Judgment Chain ring as well. And if you don't recall, the stake of Retribution is the part that Kurapika violently flings into the hearts of his enemies to give them unbreakable curse commands. He also has this thing wrapped around his own heart, so it's a fairly serious piece of kit. And decking yourself out with them is not your standard accessory. And just a pro tip, this makes an exceptional gift for any Hunter x Hunter fans for any sort of special gift-giving occasion that's coming up in December. And they even come in this incredibly handy and extremely appealing gift-ready packaging. So I'd highly recommend that you check out Nan America through my link in the description, and definitely do it soon, as they have a Black Friday sale with 40% off site-wide, and use my code NewWorldReview to get an additional 5% off with extremely quick shipping and extended 60-day returns. So don't be the accessoryless edgelord Crollo. Come on, guys. Let's all embrace the lifestyle of the Chad Kurapika and check out Nan America today. So definitely check them out, but for now it's back to you, me. When the rules were explained to us, I thought that question A was the best card, provided that you know what questions to ask, or that you just invest the time into asking every single question you can. And Boxen seems to have done both, and used it to extract an incredible amount of information from Morena. So much so that we don't even know how many questions Boxen asked, because there's this fun panel where there are so many speech bubbles, so many questions that everything just starts devolving into scribbles. And it seems to be a painful series of questions, as Boxen is trying to identify the number of each users of each affinity within the Heil-Ly family. So by the end of this, Boxen almost certainly knows the exact makeup of the family in terms of affinities, and that is huge information. But she also discovered a lot more. Something interesting is that Morena says that she doesn't know the exact abilities of all of her members. And that's surprising because I would have thought that these abilities were very intentionally developed. In fact, that's why Borkson's here in the first place. Morena needs a specialist to develop a certain specialist ability. But this could also be a bit of a technicality answer, because of course Morena wouldn't know the abilities of all of her family if they were still too low level and hadn't developed an ability yet. So it was a very vague question. But another piece of information that Borkson extracts is that, including Morena, there are currently 21 members of the Heil-Ly family, which is a bit of a big deal, because that eliminates the possibility of Kenny Wang having been recruited. But in that case, it means something more intriguing, because he's working with Morena in another capacity, which is a horrifying idea, because the amount of allies that Morena could have is now completely unknown. All we know are the exact numbers of the family, but outside of the Contagion game, there could be any number of people assisting as well. And one explanation for this may be that Contagion can't be used on an existing Nen user, which would rule out Kenny Wang, which I think would be a good restriction because otherwise things would get way out of control if, say, Hisoka were to join the family, gain a bunch of levels, be gifted a new ability, but so much worse than that, be gifted 100 levels of aura boosts. It's basically saying, kiss me and I'll double if not triple or quadruple your aura. And you know what? Throw in a new ability just for fun. I'd say that's definitely overpaying for a kiss. But to take us back to Kenny Wang, as mentioned before, he was already a Nen user, so he may not have been a candidate for Contagion, but given what we now know of the Kakin Carnivals and their connection to the underworld, I do wonder if Kenny Wang sympathizes with Morena because he also comes from that world. I don't think he's a carnival orphan because he doesn't have the facial scars, and even if you just meet, they give you the scars apparently, but the Mafia factions are deeply involved in these Kakin events. In fact, without the Mafia, I don't think that the royal family would have the capabilities to even put these events on in the first place. In which case, Kenny Wang might even be something of a good guy here. I get a very bad vibe from him because he's putting the Phantom Troop in danger, but at the same time, it's hard not to support someone who has the goal of abolishing this abomination of a nation. But I also don't think that he's Morena's only ally, because the other integral thing that Borkson discovers during the questionnaire card is the location of the Heil-Ly base, which is between tiers 2 and 3. And also it's partially created by Nen, which we already knew. When Nobunaga and Hinrigh invaded the hideout in the previous batch, they determined that the space was likely crafted by aura because of its unique properties, and slotting something like that between tier 2 and 3 would make a lot of sense, because we have seen Nen used to create pocket dimensions on a fair few occasions now. But the hideout isn't exclusively a Nen ability, meaning this is not another one of those pocket dimensions. This is an actual structural place that exists to some degree somewhere between tiers 2 and 3, meaning that this space was purpose-built on the Black Whale 1 for Morena. And it might be a space with no entrances or exits, and the only way that the Heil-Ly family can even access it is by developing their Nen abilities, which could have been by design. But whatever the case, it would seem that Morena has some pretty deep connections to be able to implement something like this. Someone high up involved in the planning and logistics of this vessel at the very least. And in addition to that, this space has also been built so that it routes all announcements directly to it, which we discover because Borkson informs us that each tier only hears the announcement relevant to that particular tier. However, when martial law is being explained, we hear the specific announcement for every tier, 1 through 5. So Morena is directly tapped into communications as well, and probably not through a Nen ability. It's more likely that it's because one of her allies did the work and ran all the infrastructure to make it happen. And then we come to Borkson's answer, which firstly is a scene I really appreciate because Borkson did have a 50-50 chance of dying right here, and after discarding the no card, Togashi draws Borkson with this overwhelming sense of relief, which is by far the most emotion we've seen out of Borkson. She's been playing it cool the entire time, but in this moment, she can finally release. Because in the state, there's nothing that Heil-Ly can do to her. They got to keep her word and release her if she chooses the X card, which she doesn't do. But also, I'm a bit suspicious of Borkson. As I said before, she's not particularly emotive. And even though this moment of relief does make sense, I think that this could be Borkson doing some acting, specifically because she crushed the return card, which makes me wonder if Borkson managed to mark it in some way during the game, probably when she asked to see the cards after complaining about taking her eyes off them during the sexual harassment. During that time, Borkson could have marked the return card in some way and is now crushing it to get rid of the evidence. Or is at the very least making the evidence harder to find, because she's creating a lot more evidence. But also selecting the S card immediately after that would be an event so shocking that no one would even think to check the return card. I mean, look, admittedly, I could just be overthinking this, but I do believe that Borkson was in full control over this final choice. From her point of view, I don't think that her life was in danger. Which makes it all the more interesting that she then went and chose the yes card with her return card. Meaning that Boxen, I guess congratulations, is joining the family. Although I should note that this hasn't been completed as of yet. Boxen right now has only ticked off 2 of the 3 conditions, one of which being the selection of yes, the other being an awkward kiss. But according to Morena, Boxen won't be recruited until the 3rd condition is cleared, which is Boxen being present whilst Morena or another family member commits murder. So I've still got to wait for that, but let's be clear here. Boxen isn't joining Morena because she was somehow convinced to join the cause. There is another plan happening here. Boxen's inner monologues have made it quite clear to us that what she's trying to do is find a way to protect the Saraynik friend group, and I think what's happening is that Boxen is trying to use the concept of vows and restrictions to her advantage and lock Morena into some sort of Nen technicality that she's seen. Perhaps finding a way that she never has to fully join, and Boxen is planning on bringing down the Heil-Ly from the inside. Because thinking about it, if Boxen did choose the X, and great, she's free to go, and Morena did promise that she would avoid her friends as best she could, but that's only a temporary measure. Eventually, the Heil-Ly family would need to target them as well, because the goal is to kill everyone. But either way, this is a pivotal moment in this arc, one that we can't quite see the ramifications of just yet, but just like how no one expected Komugi to be the turning point of the Chimera Ant arc, I have a feeling that Boxen is going to shift the succession contest into a whole new direction.